Here in the UK, younger people are facing a growing set of pressures that simply did not exist in the same way for previous generations. Housing feels out of reach, jobs are harder to secure, university costs more, and many young voters feel politics is not really listening to them. So, what is actually going on beneath the surface? In this video, we take a clear look at why younger generations are losing out in modern Britain. We break it down across housing, employment, education, and politics, and explain how today's economic and policy choices are shaping real-life outcomes for young people across the country. If you want calm, evidence-based breakdowns of what is happening in the UK economy and how it affects everyday life, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. When you zoom out, there are 4 areas where the pressure is most obvious: housing, employment, education, politics. These problems are not isolated. They feed into each other, and in many cases, policy decisions have made them worse rather than better. Let's take them one by one, starting with the most immediate issue for many young people today. Housing has become dramatically more expensive over the last few decades, largely because the planning system has failed to keep up with demand. Since 1990, wages in the UK have roughly doubled. House prices, however, have roughly quadrupled. For most of the last 75 years, the average house cost between 4 and 6 times the average salary. In 2024, the average UK house costs 7.7 times the average salary, rising to around 11 times in London. That gap has real consequences. Home ownership among young adults has fallen sharply. In 1994, nearly 60% of people aged 25 to 34 owned their own home. By 2022, that figure had dropped to around 40%. For under 25s, home ownership has fallen to just 10%. As a result, the average age of first-time buyers is now 34, the highest on record. Many young people rent instead, but that comes with its own pressure. Since 2016, average private rents have consistently exceeded 30% of median income, the threshold considered affordable by the ONS. With few affordable options available, more young adults are staying at home with their parents. Around 1/3 of people aged 25 to 27 were living with their parents in 2023, up from 20% in the early 2000s. That delay affects savings, independence, and family formation, and may even be contributing to the UK's falling birth rate. While home ownership is falling overall, it has become increasingly dependent on parental wealth. In 1975, only 6% of first-time buyers relied on financial support from their parents. By 2020, around 30% did, and 5% had their parents purchase the entire property for them. A 35-year-old whose parents do not own a home needs to earn roughly £25,000 more per year than someone with home-owning parents to have the same chance of buying a property. So while housing is harder for young people in general, it is significantly harder for those without family wealth behind them. The second major pressure point is employment. Youth unemployment currently stands at 15.3%, representing around 700,000 people. While this is lower than the peak after the financial crisis, the trend is moving in the wrong direction. This year, only 27% of final-year students had secured a job by February, down from 33% the year before. This is not because young people are applying less. In fact, graduates are submitting more applications and attending more recruitment events than in previous years. The problem is that there are fewer jobs available. Vacancies have been declining since the pandemic and are now at a 10-year low. Nearly half of the UK's largest employers reduced graduate hiring last year, and many expect to reduce it further. 2 main factors are driving this. First is the rise of artificial intelligence. Firms with high exposure to AI have cut junior roles disproportionately, while also posting fewer new vacancies. Second are policy changes that have increased the cost of hiring. Recent increases in employers' national insurance mean a full-time minimum wage worker now costs employers around £1,600 more per year to hire. Even when young people do find work, the outcomes are often weaker. Low pay remains far more common among 16 to 24-year-olds than other age groups. On top of that, early career unemployment has lasting effects. Research shows that every month of unemployment between ages 18 and 20 can reduce lifetime earnings by over 1%. That means the struggle to find work today has consequences that last decades. University has become significantly more expensive. Tuition fees have risen from £1,000 per year in the late 1990s to over £9,000 today. While student loans function like a graduate tax, many graduates will repay for the full 40-year term due to high interest rates and frozen repayment thresholds. In practice, this means many workers face marginal tax rates above 50% at certain income levels. Recent threshold freezes mean even more graduates will be pulled into repayments earlier, increasing pressure on lower and middle income earners. Despite these pressures, political decisions continue to favour older generations. Pensioner incomes have risen steadily, while benefits for working-age people have been cut. The triple lock continues to drive pension spending higher. Despite long-term affordability concerns, older voters turn out in far greater numbers, giving them more political influence. That creates a feedback loop, where younger people disengage because they feel unheard, making it easier for governments to ignore their concerns. Research from King's College London found that firms whose workforces are highly exposed to artificial intelligence reduced total employment by an average of 4.5% between 2021 and 2025. Almost all of that reduction came from junior roles, which fell by 5.8%. It does not stop there. The same research found that workplaces highly exposed to AI were 16.3 percentage points less likely to post new vacancies at all. Separate data from the job search site Adzuna shows that job postings for internships and junior roles with no degree requirements have fallen by 32% since the launch of ChatGPT in 2022. In simple terms, the very jobs people rely on to start their careers are disappearing. Technology is not the only factor at play. Recent policy changes have also made hiring more expensive. In the 2024 budget, the rate of employers' national insurance was increased. As a result, hiring a full-time worker aged 21 or over on the minimum wage now costs employers an additional £1,600 per year in tax. For businesses facing uncertainty, higher costs and fewer entry-level roles often lead to one decision: hiring slows down. Even when younger people do find work, the outcomes are often weaker than for other age groups. The Resolution Foundation found that while low pay has declined significantly among older workers since 2015, it remains widespread among people aged 16 to 24. Low pay is defined as earning less than 2/3 of the median hourly wage. There is also a longer-term effect that economists refer to as unemployment scarring. Research from the University of Leicester and the University of Nottingham shows that every month of unemployment between the ages of 18 and 20 leads to a permanent income loss of 1.2% across an entire career. That means early struggles do not just affect income today, they shape earnings for decades. Education is the next pressure point. In 1998, tuition fees were introduced at up to £1,000 per year and were means-tested based on family income. In 2004, fees were increased to £3,000 and means testing was removed. In 2012, fees rose again to £9,000. Today, tuition fees stand at £9,535 per year. Student loans are repaid through the tax system. Graduates pay 9% of their income above a set threshold, with any remaining debt wiped after 40 years. For many graduates, this effectively means paying an extra tax for most of their working lives. High interest rates, sometimes set at RPI plus 3%, mean that a large share of graduates never fully repay what they borrowed. In 2018, it was estimated that 83% of graduates would never clear their student loan balance. Because of the way repayments interact with income tax and national insurance, some workers face effective marginal tax rates above 50%. Repayment thresholds have also been frozen multiple times, most recently between 2021 and 2025. Each freeze increases the burden on lower and middle income earners by pulling more people into repayment earlier. At the 2025 budget, another threshold freeze was announced. From April 2027 for 3 years. The Office for Budget Responsibility predicts that someone on the minimum wage could earn around £28,995 in 2030, just £400 below the repayment threshold. That means many more graduates will begin repayments sooner, increasing financial pressure early in their careers. All of this sits within a political system that increasingly favours older generations. Research from 2022 found that around 1/4 of pensioners are millionaires. Pension poverty has fallen steadily for decades, and pensioners are now half as likely to live in poverty as children. In the early 2000s, pensioners had similar incomes to families with children. By 2025, pensioners are around £5,000 better off, and that gap could rise to £7,000 by the end of the decade. Government policy reflects this shift. Between 2010 and 2025, benefit changes increased pensioner incomes by an average of £900 per year. Over the same period, benefits for non-pensioners were cut by around £1,400 annually. The state pension is protected by the triple lock, which guarantees annual increases based on inflation, wage growth, or 2.5%, whichever is highest. In 2023 to 2024, the state pension cost £124 billion. By 2028 to 2029, it is expected to cost £158 billion. Government forecasts suggest that if unchanged, the triple lock could account for 7.7% of GDP by 2070. Despite concerns over affordability, governments are reluctant to reform it because older voters are more politically active. In the 2024 election, turnout among people aged 66 and above was around 20 points higher than among those aged 18 to 25. That gap creates a cycle. Younger people disengage because they feel ignored, and the system continues to respond to those who vote in greater numbers. Unless that changes, younger generations are likely to remain at the back of the political queue. If you are under 40 in the UK, which part of this affects you most right now? Housing, jobs, education, or politics? Share your experience below. This channel is about facts, not shouting. If you want clear, calm explanations of what is really happening in the UK economy and how these decisions affect everyday life, this is the place for it. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and stay with us. We break the noise down, focus on the facts, and explain what it all actually means for you.